Former racist people of Reddit, what changed your opinion? My uncle by marriage grew up with racist parents. But one day when he was 20, IIRC, he fell asleep at the wheel after working a double shift and rolled off the side of the road into a ditch late one night. It was a country road in nowhere upstate New York, and the only other person on the road at the time was a Puerto Rican man also getting off work. Pulled him from the car and drove to the nearest gas station to use the payphone, way before cell phones existed. My uncle survived thanks to that man. His car caught fire shortly after. My uncle was so touched by this man's kindness he vowed to help the man as much as could. Until my uncle's death from cancer in 2013, they remained friends. I remember hearing the story during Thanksgiving one year when I was younger and not really understanding what racism was. I grew up in a town where other races were practically a theoretical concept. I then went to college and realized we are all just people and suck equally. Saw a really good Pepsi commercial. I was raised in a really small, rural town, so it was casual racism constantly. I fell into the rhetoric. Unfortunately. What changed me? Just living and traveling and listening and trying to understand. This applies for other views as well. Traveling and just listening can really open your eyes to a lot of things and on so many levels. Take care of yourselves, folks. I grew up as one of the only white people in a predominantly black area. My parents drilled into me that they hate me just because I'm white and to fear them. And at the time they weren't necessarily wrong. Because many of those kids were being told the same thing about me at home. I just learned from experience it isn't true. I made many friends that I still love dearly, and I wish neither of us had this mindset drilled into us. Not me, but my dad's story. In the 1970s, my dad was in elementary school, said he had always thought African Americans were just different. So one day he's standing in line. And there was two African American brothers standing behind my dad when my dad turns to the younger brother and calls him a racist term. I don't remember which one. The older brother turns to my dad, winds up and punches him straight in the face. He said he was bleeding. It hurt like hell. And he was crying, but ever since that day he knew they were just like everyone else because that's exactly what he would have done. I'm a Hindu, and in India Hindus and Muslims have little bit of beef in between. There was a new student in class, Muslim. My benchmate was absent that day. Teacher made him sit on my bench with me and said no one will change their places, time passes, small talk, common interests, good friends. As soon as I was old enough to realize all my favorite foods were not American. Eye-opening. I grew up in a family that was extremely racist towards African Americans. Especially they would always rant about how AA customers at their jobs are always rude and too lazy to clean up after themselves. After I got a job myself, I realized that it seems like every races are the same. Some are rude. Some are lazy. Most people are nice regardless of the color of their skin. I just find it unfair how my parents specifically targeted AA people. I've experienced just about the same amount of rudeness and laziness from the other races. In grade 5, I learned about the Holocaust and saw a film showing how a typical Jewish family experienced it from beginning to end. Let's just say the ending left me mortified. And through listening to how adults and even celebrities portray themselves in public, I started accepting the fact that all races have good and bad apples, but the bad apples need to own up to their bigotry and learn to live with one another. Enough excuses. Edit. Thank you for the upvotes and awards. To give better context, I became more interested in social studies after grade 5 because I wanted to learn more about other cultures and races. I just became more open-minded and decided to treat others how I liked to be treated rather than because someone knew better. Definitely was a work in progress and got corrected on a lot on racist remarks over the years. Still learning now, but I got a good family and friend group. Think I turned out alright. I know we all live in turbulent times, but please do take the time to take care of one another. We are all in this together, and I know we can all pull through. Humanity has survived up until now. Right? Just recently actually. I always thought this race was simple-minded and sometimes outright idiotic. But as a F1 fan, I finally gave NASCAR a try and realized that it's not all just left turns and crashes. I now find NASCAR very enjoyable to watch. Edit. Wow lol. This comment blew up. Thank you to everyone and for all the awards. My education growing up was fairly conservative and my neighborhood lacked diversity. When I went to college, I met a ton of people who were different from me but just as human. I was around 12 when I realized that they're just as human as I am and don't deserve to be treated unfairly because of a different skin color. Fought tooth and nail with my mom many times on that after that. Edit. If someone from TikTok is looking through here for content and decides to use this comment, please blur or crop out my username. Not sure this counts, but I went from living in a hyper-religious and extremely intolerant and completely white environment to living in a county where I was the foreigner and received quite a bit of abuse for it. Swore I would never be that kind of person. I don't think I was ever racist. But as a little kid I was scared of other races. Probably because they weren't very common in my life. It didn't come from a place of hatred though. But then I watched the first Pokemon movie and Meowth said something I've always remembered. We do have a lot in common. The same earth. The same air. The same sky. Maybe if we started looking at what's the same instead of what's different. Well, who knows? And since that moment, I stopped being scared of other races. It's true as well. We should stop looking at what is different and start looking at what's the same. However, I will say that the differences in people, culture, so forth, is something to be celebrated as well. Edit. I greatly appreciate all of the comments, upvotes and the awards. Thank you. I'm glad people can relate to Meowth's wisdom, as well as my messages about the world. All the best to you all. Not racist but homophobic. Just raised that way and did not know any different. In college I got to know a few LGBT people and one day just realized I did not give a single flying fuck what people did sexually. How does this even remotely impact me in my life? Do no harm to others. LGBT people are not harming anyone else simply by being LGBT. This is kind of a long story. I'm a black man that is married to a white female. My wife and I live in the South and her parents and her grandparents are racist. We're talking the kind of racist like her grandfather and her father were members of the KKK. Like went to the meeting and all. When I met my wife of course her father did not approve. Now my wife was married prior to me to a white man and had children with him. The way I approached the situation with my wife's father was to kill him with kindness. About 2 years into our marriage her father pulled me aside and opened 2 beers and we started to drink. He apologized for his behavior and for the way he was acting and this is what he's told me. Killstorm, I want you to understand that I grew up in a different era and in a different time and it does not excuse my behavior but I hope you understand. Killstorm, I was sitting around a couple nights ago and got to thinking to myself about my daughter's first husband and how I didn't have any problem with him. But we all know he's a piece of shit. He wouldn't get a job. He wouldn't help my daughter raise those children. You came into my daughter's life and she is so happy. My grandkids are doing great. They're doing great in school. You guys bought a house together and everybody's happy. Then I realized you've done more for my daughter and her happiness than her first husband, so why should I hate you just because the color of your skin? After that point her father and I have been really cool. We drink together, smoke together, and he also helps out with projects around my house. A little side note. He was helping us move some years back to a different house and I had my best friend with me who's also white and he was also helping me move. We were sitting around about to move the next few boxes and my best friend jokingly said, "Make the black guy do it." Ha ha. My father-in-law went ape shit crazy on him and told him to never ever talk to me like that again and told him that if he ever says anything like that again to me that he was going to fuck him up. So that's how I changed an old racist heart. Kind of. My wife says that he is still racist. He's just a little less racist. But he liked me. So I'll count that as a win. Wow. I didn't think anybody would see this. I went to sleep and woke up to all of your wonderful comments and upvotes. I'm Asian and lived in the poorer parts of town. I often got harassed and even beat up by black kids, often older kids, throughout late elementary and early middle school. So I had a pretty bad opinion of them growing up. Then I met a black kid who saw me playing Pokemon on my Game Boy and he enthusiastically asked me a bunch of questions like who my starter was and if I got to the Elite Four. I was wary of him at first. But he eventually became a best friend throughout middle school and some of high school. Later in high school he started to change. He hung around the bad crowd, they were all black IRC, and he started to pretend like I didn't exist. I knew one of those dudes from my class and overheard him calling anime gay-ass Chinese cartoons. Otherwise I never had any encounters with them. I didn't talk to my friend again until senior year. He told me his old friends switched schools, got expelled or arrested. We just buried the hatchet and talked about anime and video games again like old times. Not strictly racist, but I held a fair amount of backwards views and was what I considered to be skeptical to a fault, which led to some negative preconceptions of people. It was all from misdirected fear and anger though. As I worked on being more mentally healthy and confronting those feelings for what they are, the views I thought I believed in so strongly just fell away. It's an exhausting way to live. Being hateful. It's extremely alienating. And that isolation just fuels your self-loathing, which is the root of the fear and anger. I can't say there was some altruistic moment of realization. I just sorta let it go. My parents were racists, they're Democrats. Need to specify because there's dozens of "I was raised in a conservative household" comments. I simply got older and became very good friends with a Muslim Indian kid in school. Realized my dad was full of shit and continued making friends of all races. Edit: this is getting popular quickly, so I removed a couple lines of info that would identify me pretty easy. I was raised in a very conservative household that was in a very well-off area of my city. So there weren't a lot of black or Hispanic minorities. But there were a lot of Middle Eastern minorities, they were also well off. I picked up some of my parents' racist mentalities and held on to them for a long time. I didn't start changing my mentality until I went to college and met a lot of people who were in vastly different economic situations. My parents made it seem like black and Hispanic people were mostly in the lower tax brackets because of their own faults, but that obviously isn't the case. It made me realize that hard work does not pay off in the end. My Phil was a personal injury lawyer and was doing very well until tort reform was passed in my state. Then things went downhill fast. Also, my own financial struggles and desperateness also put me in the shoes of criminals, and helped me understand that even though there are bad eggs, not everybody in a specific race is bad. The system is rigged against people who struggle. Honestly, I thought there would be a difference, but they all taste the same. I stopped being Mormon. My parents weren't racist, but the entire depressed logging town I grew up in was. Basically, there was a very heavy divide between the Latino and white community. And both really disliked the African Americans. In fact, the only thing all races could really get together about was their hatred of owls. Every yard, no matter your part of the neighborhood, there was a sign up front basically saying "fuck owls." But my best friend's mom was very good in my life. I was a latchkey kid, so instead of going home to my drug-addled older abusive brother, I would prefer to spend my days sitting down with my best buddy watching TV, and his mom would make us hamburgers and milkshakes. Basically my second mom. But she was very racist. A certain kind of nut was called something entirely different. Lots of racial-based colloquials. She had Little Black Sambo in her collection. She once had a property checked out by a person of color and asked me and my friend to keep an eye on him because he couldn't be trusted. So I didn't really realize this at the time, tbh. I can tell you 1,000 racist things that just flew away over my fucking head somehow. When my parents got divorced near the start of high school and I moved into a liberal city with my mom, I discovered how shitty the town was. And the divide. And everything. My dad's second family had 2 African American stepbrothers for me, and they really made me realize it. It took me a while and a lot of correction, but I eventually shed a lot of her and that town's influence. Same with my bestie. Neither of us go back anymore. It's kind of sad to see people who stayed. I grew up, moved away from the racist influences, met people of other races, and decided then that I would treat people as individuals to like or not, as attitude dictated. Not by race, religion, sexuality, etc. Makes life simpler. It takes way too much energy to hate. I am still a young person. But I was a racist piece of shit for a long time. I'm sure if you go back enough in my post history, you can still see the remnants of who I used to be. For me, what really changed it was growing up and having good friends that cared enough to see the person I could be. Even though I was an unbelievably nasty racist poss. Through many conversations, interactions, and even arguments, I grew up as a person into who I am today. I'm still not the greatest person on earth, but I'm still working to be the best I can be. High school. Went from my Brooklyn neighborhood where I threw around every ugly word with my buddies almost daily to my very first week in high school when I said some stupid comment and got the dirtiest looks from my brand new friends. It was the combination of disgust, disappointment, and even pity that made me realize that something was very wrong and that something was in me. I had to make very conscious efforts to not think like that for years until it finally came naturally. The best thing is my 3 children don't have to make any effort at all. It's just normal for them to not think the way I did. I used to be racist cuss I though people that play Mario Kart were called racists instead of racers. Joined the military. Found out my parents were fucking assholes for what they told us. The 10 best friends I had were not white. Smarter. Stronger. More integrity. More dignity. More understanding. And willing to talk to me openly to help me understand without judging me for who I was. One guy in particular I'll never forget. He lived on the ship. Didn't go out in port. Didn't buy civilian clothes. Just worked. Read books. Slept. And did it again. His bunk was next to mine. I asked him one day what he was reading and why he never left the ship. He had a master's degree from Egypt. But enlisted in the U.S. Navy to work towards becoming a citizen. He was reading books to study English and everything else he needed for his tests. He loved the United States. The reason he never left the ship was because all of his money. For 3 years. He sent home to his wife and kids who were waiting for him to be able to bring them over. He didn't spend a dime off the boat. Most squared-away sailor I'd ever known. That man deserved to stand under our flag more than 90% of the people I knew at home. I cannot believe people judge anyone by race or color or religion. There's so many problems around already. And humans have been killing each other for exactly that for thousands of years. Imagine where humanity would be if we wasted no resources on fighting each other. Edit. Typo. I wasn't raised racist, but there was definitely sprinkles of racism. Generally just things we didn't realize were fucked up back then, bad jokes. There's a difference between a black person and a dumb shit like that. Not that it justifies it. My mom did her best to teach us we're all human. But still locked the car door if a black person was parked near us in the grocery store parking lot type shit. Anyway. My predominantly white school, in a town that's known for racist cops and racist old-school Italians, had this crazy race war when I was a sophomore. There was a sufficient amount of kids being sent to our school from the town over so our numbers were more diverse. A lot of kids had an issue with that. One of the group of kids I hung out with were the typical blonde hair. Blue eye. Red neck. Big truck. Let's see if we can put a motor on anything type of guys. Not to say all people like that are racist, but you know what I mean, and I fell right into that mentality. Not to mention I was on a lot of drugs at the time and reckless. Definitely seeking any kind of attention. A lot of the school was on lockdown in the cafeteria while shit was kind of hitting the fan. The group I was with was going on some high and mighty racist Proud Boy type rant blah blah blah. One of my friends wrote, "Stompers on my boots with white out. When I tell you my mom beat the racism out of me when I got home. Phew. During the ass-kicking of my life my mom was saying how, being gay, I came out a year prior, I'll be judged every day for the rest of my life and I should be standing with the people who I can relate to so we can grow strong against the people who see us as different by the color of our skin or who we love etc. Instead of being against them and being part of the problem. That stuck with me immediately and I began to work on educating myself as much as I could. With very little resources given the predominantly white school and internet not being what it is now. When I got into my 20s I got a job in a neighboring city. I became the minority and learned more than I could imagine about the things my co-workers who I called friends faced every single day. Shit I saw with my own eyes for the first time. Things that, when I was younger, thought were exaggerated. I cringe at the thought of the person I was and could have turned into if it wasn't for the lesson my mom taught me that day. More the things she said than the beating lol. I feel gross even writing all of this. So on my behalf I am sorry for the uneducated, trashy, druggy, racist asshole I used to be and I am so grateful for the things I have learned and views I have changed since being a kid. We are all one. And we all got to be in this fight together. Was raised as a conservative white Christian. Of course I'd never say, I am a racist. I'd just say things along the lines of, I'm not racist. I just think that everyone should look, speak, and act like white people if they want to have jobs and property. Just getting the fuck out of rural Arizona. Moving to a city and meeting new people shattered my entire worldview. Within a couple years, my perspective had widened enough to see my previous views and lifestyle as laughable. moving TF out of rural TX and meeting more people. Also working and having to work with and around people of different races and walks of life. I didn't realize I was racist. And when I realized I couldn't recognize racist behavior at all. I had to take a step back and re-evaluate myself. I grew up in a mostly white town. I can count on one hand the number of black people at my local high school. My mother is passively racist. And my father and brother are openly racist. Against black people, Chinese, Mexicans, Muslims, a lot of races and ethnicities. When I learned about the indigenous in school, as per new Ontario curriculum, all three were vocally opposed to it. And commonly expressed that it was stupid. It was a weird experience. Especially because I had been desensitized to racist behavior for a good portion of my life. It's hell to still be living with my family now that I realize how horrible they are. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.